In this tutorial, I thought that it would be helpful to give a brief introduction to some of the different edit styles that are possible in Edius and the various ways that you can bring media to your timeline and how you can work with them on your timeline. In the tutorials that follow, we will give more detailed instruction on the various editing styles and how to work with your bin window and the timeline windows to be able to get efficient results from your edit sessions. But since this will take a number of tutorials to unfold in detail, I thought that we should take one tutorial now at the beginning and introduce some of the more common features of the program. Let's go ahead and start it up. And just in case you have downloaded the program and fired it up and jumped straight to this tutorial without looking at some of our others first, I would like for you to make sure that your settings are like my settings so that you are in the same mode that I am. And that way, as I demonstrate procedures here on my computer in this tutorial, you will be able to follow along on your computer and, in theory at least, should get the same results that I'm showing you. So let's take a moment and go over here to the very left-hand side of the timeline window, and let's notice our symbols right here. Now, if you happen to just fire up the program without looking at a couple of our previous tutorials, specifically the one on how to change your settings, by default, Edius will fire up the first time and be in what's called the insert mode. And you can see that illustrated by the little blue arrow that is splitting the two clips and sending one portion of the clip further down the timeline to insert your new material. And that's what's called the insert mode. And also by default, Edius ships the first time you fire out the program, it will be the ripple mode will be on. And for the purposes of this tutorial, especially at the beginning of the tutorial, we would like to be in what's called the overwrite mode. So just go ahead and click this symbol once and you'll see that the blue arrow turns to an amber color and you will now be in what's called the overwrite mode. The little drop-down text box might seem a little confusing there even when you are in what's called the overwrite mode. In brackets there it says insert. Not sure why they did that. Go more by the symbol, the orange or amber symbol, rather than the text box there. And just know that when it shows amber that you are in the overwrite mode. And also for the beginning of this tutorial, we're going to turn our ripple mode off. And you can confirm that the ripple mode is indeed off when you see the orange stripe going through this symbol. And with those two settings changed, your results for the most part should reflect mine as we go along in this lesson. Now, in order to bring clips down into the timeline, if you have any media, any video clips on your hard drives, maybe just go ahead and bring some of that media into your bin so that you can follow along with this tutorial. And how you can bring media from your hard drives into your project and place them in the bin window is with this little symbol up here, Add Clip, or by simply clicking in the dead space, the gray area here. Just double click there and you will open up an Explorer window. And with this window open, you can navigate your hard drives searching for video material that you can bring in. And Edius will recognize almost every type of video material. So anything that you might have on your hard drives, whether it's AVI files or M2T files, QuickTime files, you can go ahead and select those and just hit the open button, and that will bring media into your bin that you can work with alongside me here as we are showing you some of the different ways that you can edit in Edius. Now I notice that my clips are taking a long time to come in to the bin, even though I only selected 20 or so. It's really taking a long time. What can happen if you're noticing that on your computer? Just go to your antivirus software and make sure that it has been temporarily disabled. I realize that now I did have my antivirus software turned on, and that's the reason why those clips were taking so long to enter my bin. So now with our antivirus software disabled, things should run a lot smoother. Okay, now there are several different ways to bring media into your timeline that you can assemble on your timeline to make your edit decisions. One way is to bring them into your preview window first so that you can take a look at a clip to see whether it is something that you're going to want to use in your edit. And how you can do that is by pointing to a media clip or the representation of your media clip, pointing to this picon in your bin, and holding down your left mouse button, drag and drop that clip into your preview window. Let go of your mouse button and it shows up in your preview window. And it looks like we've looked at this clip once before, and we already see that it has a selected area here already with an in and out point. But let's say we're looking at this clip for the first time. Several ways you can do that. Once it's over in your preview window and your focus is in your preview window, you've got your green border and your blue border here. Go ahead and just hit the space bar and that will play the clip. And as you look at it, you can determine what parts you might want to use in your edit. And hitting the space bar again pauses your clip or stops your clip. Another way that you can play your clip is using the buttons down here to control your play. And hitting it again pauses it. You can rewind if you like using this button or fast forward. However, I find the easiest and the quickest way often is to simply point to this little slider bar here with your mouse, and holding down your left mouse button, drag this little slider bar across and scrub through your video. And this way you can quickly examine the clip and determine if there is a portion that you would like to use. And once you have found something, you can set an in point, either using your keyboard shortcut, I for in point, and then scrolling across, find an out point, and with your keyboard shortcut again, hit an O for an out point, and now we have a new selected in and out point as demonstrated there by the highlighted section of the clip. Now another way that you can set an in and out point is by using your buttons here again. Let's say this is our in point here that we want. Go ahead and just press that. We've got a new in point. Because our out point is before our in point, the selected area has turned a cautionary pink and your time code has turned red to let you know that your out point is way before your in point. So what we just need to do is go ahead and look at our video and find our out point and go ahead and click our button for out point, and now we have a new selected area. Okay, but let's go back to our wide shot of the girls picking up the firewood, and let's bring that down to our timeline. Now there are several ways that you can bring this into your timeline now. One, perhaps the simplest way, is to simply drag and drop it. Just go ahead and point to the video in your preview window and press down your left mouse key and then drag and drop that down to your timeline. Now, as we look at our timeline, we see even though the duration of our selected portion of this clip is actually 6 seconds long, it's hardly showing up here on the timeline at all. Well, what we need to do is expand our timeline out so that we can see that better. And the way that you can do that is over here in this slider bar. You can drag this to your left and we'll see that our timeline grows or expands, and now our clip, our 6-second clip, grows much bigger so that we can see it better. Now if you watched one of the previous tutorials that showed you how you could set keyboard shortcuts for the same action, you might want to go ahead and practice using those. The plus key will expand out your timeline. Hitting the minus key will contract your timeline. So let's go after another clip. Oh, by the way, we noticed that if you're an experienced editor at all, you'll notice that what happened here is when we dragged our media onto our timeline, all we got was video. We didn't get any of the audio. Our audio track is blank. So what's going on here? What has happened is we have not yet told Edius that we want to receive video. And the way that we can do this is turn on an audio track or map an audio track. So now with our audio track turned on, when we drag, let's get a different clip here. Let's maybe pick this clip. And this time, rather than drag and drop our clip over to our preview window, let's simply double click on our clip and notice that that also brings the clip. So now let's get an in point. Let's use our I key to set our in point. And the out point, 4 seconds long, is probably good enough. And we'll notice that this time when we drag our clip down to our timeline, we see that not only do we have the video, but we also have the audio. Now, once we have mapped or turned on video track 1 and audio track 1, notice what happens when we bring clips into other tracks. Let's go after a interview clip here where the girl is telling her story. Let's say we want the video portion of our interview to land on video track 2 and the audio portion of her interview to go to track 2. In some video editing programs, you will have to take the time to tell the program that you want the video to go to track 2, video and audio. And you do that either by pointing to this section here, or in this case, Edius, I think, has you slide up and with a sliding motion bring this down to track 2. And that way we have now mapped video track 2 and audio track 2. And if you want to, if you're used to working that way and editing that way, by all means go ahead and map your tracks each time before you make an edit. But just take notice that Edius comes by default as working more like Premiere Pro, where once you have mapped video and audio tracks 1, you do not always have to take the time to map your tracks before you drag and drop your clips to the timeline. For example, if we want to bring this interview down to video track 2, notice that Edius, without mapping the tracks, will accept that clip on video track 2 just by dragging your clip and pointing to track 2. And notice that it also automatically places your audio down on audio track 2. And just like Premiere Pro, if you were to drag that clip and point to track 3, you'll see that the audio is going to track 3. Or if you wanted to send to video track 4, just simply point your clip to track 4 and let your mouse go, and you'll see that it goes to track 4 and that your audio has gone down to track 4. Well, you ask, what if I want my video to be on track 2 and my audio to land on track 4? What do you do then? Well, there's where you might want to start mapping your tracks. You can drag this down to audio track 4. Now, once Edius sees that you're starting to map the tracks, it doesn't quite work the same. Now, if we were to drag the interview down to video track 2, notice that our audio still goes one track below the selected track. Once you start mapping audio tracks, Edius expects that you want your audio to go there only when you place the video where the video has been mapped. So for example, if we drag our video down to the video track that is mapped, our audio is now going down to the audio track that is mapped. Okay, let's maybe get a shot of the girl walking home with her firewood. I believe this is it. And this time, rather than drag and drop our clip into our preview window, or even double clicking on the clip to bring it into our preview window, notice that we can also simply drag and drop the clip directly down into the timeline and work with your clip right on the timeline. Notice that it's just as easy to scrub through your clip right on the timeline as it was right here in your preview window. And so basically you've saved a step. You can view or preview your clip right on the timeline. And rather than take the time of setting an in and out point and dragging your clip from your preview window down to your timeline, you can simply search for your in point by scrubbing along with your timeline cursor. And when you found a good in point, you can go to the edge of your clip and trim the clip by pointing to the edge of it with your pointer and holding down your left mouse key, dragging the end of that clip to that point on the timeline, and then just pointing again to the clip and dragging it so that it connects up with our previous clip. Now we have our in point, and we take it to our out point. We could either take the time to trim that clip by grabbing the end of it and sliding it back, or we could just leave it there and know that the next clip that we bring in, we'll just drag and drop it right to that point. Let's go after another clip and just drag it again down to the timeline. Here she is working on something in her doorway. Let's say that that is the clip that we'd like to take a look at. Once again, we can drag it right down to that point where we decided would be a good out point for the last clip, and just let our new clip go there. And that way we have overwritten the portion that we don't want. So now we can scroll through this clip very easily by dragging our timeline cursor, and we see something nice right in about there. Again, we can do the same motion of dragging it across. So that's one style of editing, one method of editing. We could call it a drag and drop method or a free form style of editing if you like. And it works especially well as you're just starting out your edit and assembling clips on the timeline, just taking a look at what might work. And can be a very fast and efficient form of editing. But let's say we're going through our bin and we find some more clips that kind of tell a little bit more of the story of collecting firewood. And let's say as we look through these clips, we decide that we really do want to include these shots into our story. And let's set an in point here and see her struggling with this big bundle of firewood. Take it to about there. Now, if we wanted to continue to use the drag and drop method, what we would have to do is find that point where it's going to fit in. It'll be right here after she's been collecting the firewood before she starts working home. What we would have to do in order to insert that clip here is with the lasso method, go ahead and grab those two clips, drag them down the timeline, and then drag our new clip into place. And just to make sure there aren't a few more, we might continue to look at this clip and see we have a nice shot of her tying up her firewood, so we again would have to get an in and out point and drag that clip down. And then here's a nice shot of her stringing them onto her back and struggling as she gets up with her big bundle. Well, that would be kind of nice to include in our story too. So using the drag and drop method can become tedious and difficult and imprecise, as we see that when we try and drag and drop this clip into place, that it's much larger and will overwrite the clips that are on our timelines. So we have to go back and let that go and go down here and lasso these again and drag them across before we can drag and drop our new clip into place. So that's not always a very workable situation. Let's undo our edits here and come back to that point before we found these extra clips. And this time let's use a different method. Let's find that same in point again where she's struggling with her big bundle there. Set our in and out points. And if you are coming from, say, Avid software, where you're used to working with a 3-point style of editing or a 4-point style of editing, and you're wondering, does Edius allow me to do the 3-point style editing? Well, yes, you can do that. Find that point on your timeline where you want to place your edit, and that would be right here. And you can go over into your record preview window and set your in point here. And now we have 3 points. We have an in and out point over here, and we also have an in point on our timeline. And we see that showing up being represented on our timeline as an in point. Now, instead of dragging and dropping, let's choose this method of adding a new clip, insert to timeline. And notice what happens now. The new clip is placed where we want it, and the other two are pushed down exactly where we want them to be. Now we see her struggling with her bundle, and now she's walking. Well, we remember we have a couple more shots that we do also want to insert. Here we have her tying up her bundle, and we might want to include that. And so we get our in and out point. But this time, rather than set our in point on the timeline using this 3-point style method, notice that we simply need to have our timeline at that point where we want to insert our edit. And as long as our timeline cursor is in the place where we want our next clip to go, then we're fine. Simply again use our insert to timeline. And the one more clip where she's struggling to get up. And again, with our timeline cursor in place, use the insert to timeline. And we see that we now have a much more complete story of this girl collecting her firewood. Now you may have noticed, let's just undo this, you may have noticed that beside the insert to timeline, you also have the option of overwrite to timeline. And if we should select this button here with our timeline cursor where it is, you can guess what will happen. This clip, as we bring it down to the timeline using the overwrite button, is going to override any media that is here with the new clip, with the new material. And so now we see that we have brought our clip in, but we've also lost the previous two clips that were there. They've been overwritten. And there will be times when you want to use the overwrite. Let's say we no longer wanted these two clips, then we would indeed want to overwrite them. So it's good to know the difference between overwrite to timeline and insert to timeline. Okay, but let's say as we're working with this, we realize that we don't have time in our story for all of these shots, and so we need to choose which ones we're going to want to keep. And let's say we really like this shot here of the girl struggling to stand up with her big bundle. And so we'd like to keep that, and it takes priority over these two where she's gathering her bundle and tying her bundle. Well, what we could do is use what's called a 4-point style of editing, and that is choose 4 points. We've got our in and an out point here. Let's also set an in and out point on our timeline. And we can do that again with our I key for our in point, and take that right to the end of the two clips that we're going to replace, set my out point, and now we can choose the overwrite to timeline, and that will replace the two clips with the one clip of the girl standing up with her firewood. Before we wrap up this introductory tutorial on the different styles of editing, I'd like to show you one more. And for this demonstration, let's go over here to our mode settings and set them to the insert mode, and also to have the ripple mode on. And this is a method that I call the quick down and dirty method, and that is what we could do is go ahead and find all of the shots that illustrate this story of girls in Africa, in Ethiopia, going to collect firewood. I believe it's this section here. With holding down my shift key, I have selected a number of shots at the same time. And now when I drag, even though I'm pointing only to one clip, I can, because I have a whole group of clips selected, when I drag these down to the timeline and place them on the timeline, I get a number of clips coming at once. And if we contract our timeline, we see that indeed we have the whole story here of the girls going to collect firewood. And they have come down in their entirety, from the in point of each clip to the out point of every clip. They're all down on the timeline. And so what we need to do now is go through here and very quickly assemble these clips in a way that gets rid of the parts that we don't want, and deletes clips that we may not be able to use. And this style of editing, I find, comes in very handy when you are coming back from a family event, especially a picnic or a birthday party or whatever, and you have shot a couple of hours of tape, and your family members, your friends are asking you, could they please have a copy of that? And you may be busy on deadlines and don't really want to take too much time to do it. This is a quick and down and dirty method to assemble that event very efficiently. Let's go ahead and expand out our timeline so that we can see what we're doing a little better on our timeline. And we see that the very first portion of this clip has a lot of lighting problems, and yet it starts to look good right about there. Notice what happens when we go to the very edge of the first clip and start to trim it back. We see that it not only is trimming that first clip, but it's also dragging all of the other clips down the timeline to the left as we do it. And watching the record monitor, we look for that point where we want to actually start the video, and then let our mouse go. And then as we scrub through it, we can see that it's fine to about here, and then we start to get a lot of camera motion. So we want to have our endpoint there. Well, what we do now is go to the edge of the clip and start trimming it back. And as we do, we notice that, again, it brings all of those clips that are down the timeline over to the left. So we're jumping into our next clip, and we see that it's a little unstable there right at the beginning, and yet we want to see the girls just kind of walk into the shot. And again, we could do that in the same way, going to the edge of the clip and start dragging it across. Or you can simply cut the video at this point by hitting your C key, and that makes a cut in your clip. You now have two clips from the one clip. And now what you can do is, with that first clip selected, just hit the delete key, and you'll notice that you get rid of that unsteady section at the beginning of that clip, and when you deleted it, all of the other clips down the timeline moved to the left. We see the girls walking along, and the camera gets unstable there again, so we need to get out of the clip rather quickly. And once again, we can hit the C key to cut that clip in two, and either again using our trim method, get to that point where we want to start the video again. Maybe right about here. Or if we prefer, once again, we can find that point by scrubbing along, and when we see the point where we want to start the clip, go ahead and hit the C key again and select the portion that we don't want, hit the delete key, and it's gone, and continues to drag everything in. And so using this approach, we can see how you can very quickly assemble an event. And when you see redundancies, maybe you've overshot quite a bit and there are some clips that you just don't want to keep in the program, you don't even need to break it in two. You can just simply select that whole clip, hit delete, and that clip is gone. And that whole section there isn't really good till you get to about here in your timeline. So once again, we hit the C key, choose the portion we don't want, and we bring it down. After the girls have skipped for a while, they're off to collect their firewood. We see that we have really shot a lot of this, and so we could go in and scrub through our timeline quickly and get a feel for our shots, which ones are going to be the ones that we want, and then go ahead and just simply delete. Well, you get the idea of how you can very quickly assemble an edit by dragging and dropping a whole section of video from your bin to your timeline, and then going ahead and with the ripple mode on, trimming and cutting out portions that you don't want. All right, well, that's it for our free tutorials on Edius version 6. We're glad that you've taken the time to go through the lessons here. And if you found these to be valuable and you'd like to learn more about Edius, I encourage you to take a look at our subscription program. For a very small fee, you can go through the rest of our tutorials, not only on version 6, but also version 5. And if you're an experienced editor, maybe all you'll need to do is just get a day pass and go through some of those tutorials that explain some of the differences between Edius and some of the other video editing programs. If you are brand new to video editing, you might want to just go ahead and save some money by getting a month pass. It's not much more than the day pass, and that way you can go through the tutorials slowly at your own pace and get to them as you have time, and be able to learn Edius over the course of a month. And then there'll be others who, maybe like me, are slow learners and might just want to save some more money and get a 6-month pass or a year-long pass. We intend to be adding more tutorials after we're finished adding all of the tutorials on version 6. We're going to go ahead and continue our lessons by showing how you can integrate Edius with other programs like Adobe After Effects and Photoshop. And so those tutorials will be coming down the pike a little bit later in the spring or summer, and so by having that year-long pass, you'll be able to take advantage of that without having to sign up again. All right. Well, once again, I appreciate you taking a look at these programs, and hope to see you over in the subscription plan.